You know, in Florence Scovel Shinn's work, she talks about these big, fundamental laws for life. But there's one that stands out as both the most powerful and, well, the most misunderstood: the law of love. Most of us think of love as this soft, sentimental feeling, right? But what if it's actually an active, strategic force that we can use to tackle just about any challenge?
So that brings us right to the big question here. Is love just a soft feeling, or is it a powerful strategic force? See, Shinn was convinced that if we get this wrong, we miss out on all its power. For her, it wasn't some passive emotion. It was an active principle you could actually use to create real change in your life.
Okay, so here's our game plan for this explainer. First, we're going to define what this law of love actually is, and just as important, what it isn't. Then we'll pinpoint the real blockers, see how it works in 3 different areas of life, and I'll leave you with a quick reset you can try out today.
All right, so let's start by looking at love as an active principle. Shinn really believed that going against this law was the root of pretty much all our unhappiness. And we're not talking about just being nice here. It's about consciously aligning with this powerful force that, creates harmony and success.
Okay, so what does that even mean in plain English? Well, Shinn describes it as a selfless, fearless force. Think of it as a state of active goodwill that you're just pouring out without asking for anything back. The key words here are active and fearless. This is a conscious choice you make, not just some fuzzy feeling that happens to you.
And this is where it really flips our usual way of thinking on its head. The real power of this law isn't in what you get back. No, the true joy, that magnetic pull, comes from the act of giving itself. It's a huge shift from a mindset of what can I get to one of what can I give. Okay, so it's super important to draw a line in the sand here and separate this active principle from its common counterfeits. It's so easy to confuse things like people-pleasing or enabling with love. But Shinn's point is that those things are actually rooted in the exact opposite: fear.
And when you put them side by side, the difference is just night and day. Active love is all about goodwill for sure, but it's also smart, it's discerning, it empowers people. On the other hand, you've got passive appeasement, which just enables bad behavior because you're scared of conflict or you need that approval. You see? One comes from strength, the other comes from fear.
So, if this law is so powerful, you have to ask, what stops it? What gets in the way? Well, Shinn zeroes in on 2 specific mental habits that just completely shut down the flow of goodwill in our lives.
And here they are: fear and resentment. That's it. Fear is what fuels jealousy and that need to control everything, which Shinn actually called love's worst enemy. And then there's resentment, which is like carrying this heavy backpack around all day. It's a negative pattern that literally blocks anything good from getting through to you. Okay, enough with the theory, right? Let's get practical. How does this law actually show up in the real world? We're going to look at 3 really common areas: our jobs, our relationships, and even our own personal habits. And what you'll see from these examples is just how versatile this whole principle is. It's not just for one thing. It's a tool you can use for challenges at work, for tricky situations in your relationships, and even for that inner work of breaking your own negative cycles. So Shinn tells this great story about one of her students. This woman had a boss who was just cold, critical, and she was absolutely terrified of her. Now, Shinn didn't tell her to quit her job or to go have some big confrontation. Instead, she gave her this really simple instruction: every single day, silently, salute the divinity in your boss. Basically, just send her love.
And this just perfectly captures the whole idea. At first, the student was like, no way, she's a marble woman. But Shinn's response was brilliant. She used this metaphor of a sculptor who doesn't see a block of stone, but sees the angel hidden inside the marble. By choosing to see her boss's best self, her highest potential, the student totally shifted her own energy. And what happened? Before long, her boss's behavior completely transformed. She became kind and supportive.
All right, let's switch gears to relationships. Another story: a woman comes to Shinn just heartbroken because her husband left her, and she ends up admitting that she'd been telling her friends for a while that she wasn't really that interested in being married, that she had really taken him for granted. Shinn pointed out that our words, our feelings, they're like boomerangs. That lack of appreciation actually pushed away the very thing she wanted, and it led to loss. And finally, let's talk about our own internal habits. How many of us get stuck in a loop of resentment, right? It's so common. Shinn taught that the key, the absolute key to breaking that cycle is forgiveness. And let's be clear, this has nothing to do with saying what happened was okay. It's not about that at all. Forgiveness is about setting yourself free. It's a practical tool you use to drop that heavy bag of resentment so that you can actually move forward.
Okay, so after all that, what's a simple, practical thing you can do to apply this law, like right now? Here's a quick love reset you can use anytime you're feeling that friction or fear or resentment bubbling up. And the power of this practice is just how simple it is. 3 steps. First, just pause. Take one single conscious breath. Second, pinpoint what or who is causing that friction. And third, consciously send goodwill their way. And this last part is everything. You do it without any expectation of a specific result. The goal isn't to change them. It's to shift your own internal state from fear back to love.
So, let's just quickly recap the big ideas here. First, love isn't just a feeling. It's an active, strategic force. Second, its real power is in selfless goodwill, giving without needing anything in return. Third, the biggest things holding us back are our own fear and resentment. And finally, remember that to forgive is to set yourself free.
You know, when you practice the law of love, it clears out a lot of the noise, and that makes it easier to hear your own inner guidance. And that actually leads us perfectly into our next explainer, which is all about intuition. If you want to see the whole series, you can find it in our Game of Life playlist. Thanks so much for joining me.